Here we go. Boom. Purple Room podcast today with my blood of my student's mug. I resent that sentiment. With Eiden, what are we talking about?
Guten Tag. Punk and its ethos, music, and lifestyle.
Okay, so assuming that our listeners know nothing about punk, what is punk?
Well, that's a pretty complicated question.
It's literally my job to ask you complicated questions.
Yeah. Punk is, I'll start with the ethos. So the ethos I'm going to break into three parts so that people can kind of digest it as easily as possible.
So what I'm hearing is that it is not music.
It's...
Because I think most people would think punk and
Right.
think music. So
Yeah.
talk to me about that distinction.
The music is the soundtrack to the lifestyle that it represents and talks about.
Okay, so music is a vessel for values and ethics.
Yeah. And
All
the
right.
people who make that music often either pretend to much of the time or actually do live that ethos.
Okay, so what is the ethos then?
The ethos is DIY, do it yourself. The Phoenix Syndrome, which is when something dies, something new and creative and innovative has to come out of that, and fuck you. Always fuck you.
Okay. And I mean, as to what are you going to start with? Because I have thoughts on the Phoenix thing, which is JJ's Purple Room hot takes is that punk history is inherently revisionist history. No, I won't be elaborating. Hashtag no nuance November.
Okay. Please elaborate on that,
No.
JJ.
This is your talk.
Okay. DIY, do it yourself. I guess we could start with that.
All right.
Because I think it's the most prevalent to most people's lives.
I love DIY shows.
And I think that's one of the ones that's closest linked to the music, because when bands are coming up in the punk scene, they're not being signed to record labels, and if they are being signed to record labels, then it's really small record labels that are run by other punk bands. And then I guess if you get to the top of that pyramid, you might eventually find someone like Green Day who's signed to a real label. But
And I mean, to an extent, like, in the beginning, in the late 60s, early 70s, like, there was just not a lot of people wanting to sign punk bands. Like, now we have things like Hellcat Records, which, like, the Interrupters and whatnot are on, where, like, there are labels that will do that, but they are inherently
the
punk.
beginnings of it, like, I think the peak of, or not the peak, the beginning of independent labels is like the Black Flag era, like hardcore, the early 80s, when people were realizing that you don't need all those resources that the Sex Pistols got from like EMI.
Right.
Yeah. To become a punk band, because if you're DIY, you don't need anyone, you just need yourself and your community.
Yes. And there's something to that, right? Because I mean, punk is inherently creation of community. There's something there. Like, I have a deep appreciation for the punk scene's ability to police itself, but
Sometimes.
I think, yeah, the DIY ethic, particularly in LA, started at one of the. Are you familiar with the history of the Elks Riot? Which was like one of the, like, I think it was a show with like X, the Go-Go's,
Probably the weirdos.
like Dills and the Weirdos, yeah, and like the cops like busted in, started doing cop stuff, and like that was part of like the nexus of like riots with cops at punk shows.
Yeah, I want to say Joan Jett was at that show, by the way.
Okay.
Joan Jett and the Pat Smear of Nirvana and the Foo Fighters. They were both at that show, and I think they met each other.
No shit, I don't think I knew
And
that.
They were friends.
I mean, that tracks. So there is that where it's like, well, we're going to have to run our own shows, police our own scene, and release our own music if this is what is going to happen, which is police violence at that point.
And the other thing about like the shows is every punk scene kind of circled around like one venue. Like in LA, it was the Cuckoo's Nest,
Mm-hmm.
and New York, it was CBGB's. Boston, it was like Rats or something like
Okay.
that. I want to. Don't quote me on that.
It's literally going on the internet, so like you will be preserved in the ether forever.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Well, my guitar teacher mentioned that, and he's a pretty well versed in everything kind of guy.
So how does DIY sprawl? Like, what does DIY mean for punks today?
Shit. Well, see, I wish you could answer that question because you kind of live it more.
Did I build my truck? Yes.
Literally that exactly. Like doing your own shit without, like, kind of everyone can live DIY a lot easier now because we have the internet. So if you're like, I don't know, you need to replace a light fixture instead of hiring a dude, the punk thing to do would be to go on YouTube and figure out how to do it yourself. It's like, instead of going to society to fix your problems, you do it yourself.
Right. So why?
Because you don't want to be reliant, I guess.
Okay. So we have the DIY ethic, and that DIY is punk. It is self-sufficiency. It is
do it yourself because the other people fucked you over, and you can't trust them.
Would you argue that there is an art aspect to DIY?
What do you mean, an art aspect to DIY?
Like the creation and distribution of art that may be not as well received by the mainstream because it diverges from things like fine art. Like, is DIY an art form?
Yeah, of course. And
tell me about that. Tell them about this.
That's, I think, the biggest connection to the music in DIY is the distribution. The way bands toured, like hardcore bands would tour in like a little van, and they would stay on their punk friends' floors. They wouldn't stay in a motel, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And they probably got robbed a lot, suck to suck. So it's like trying to, I mean, I guess you can't really be DIY individually. You kind of have to create a community to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But DIY within your community is what it is. And I don't know, the art of it is, well, now I'm kind of, I've lost myself in my own thoughts.
Okay, that's my defining characteristic. Give me some examples of DIY through the lens of the music.
NoFX started record labels with like Epitaph, that type of shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yes, NoFX, Fat Mike. He tried to sign as many small bands as he could to get their message heard because the big labels didn't like skate punk because they're stupid and didn't know how much money it would make.
And people shit on NoFX. I
shit on NoFX.
I shit on NoFX too, but I like NoFX. Like Punk and Drublick is in my top 10 albums of all time. The Linoleum's a great song.
Like, they actually kind of knew how to write songs, which is pretty rare for punk.
And the production
which is
value
also
was
part
terrible.
of DIY because they, like, people don't realize how many big artists don't write their own songs.
Yeah.
But punk didn't do that. They pretty much exclusively wrote their own songs, and that's part of the reason that most of the songs in punk, from a purely songwriting perspective, fucking suck. Like, I love them, I'm a songwriter, but they are awful. No melody. They have no idea what they're doing. Except when you get to, like, I mean, there are, once in a while, you got, like, geniuses, like fucking Joe Strummer, who he really knew how to write a song. Kurt Cobain, you want to talk about him being punk. I think he's punk.
No,
he should be punk.
Kurt Cobain is punk.
Yeah, he was
I
punk.
would say.
He knew how to write a song.
I mean, there were
Joey
definitely lyrical moments in Nirvana.
I mean, melodically in Nirvana, lyrical in a lot of punk. Like, Dead Kennedys had cool lyrics.
Yeah.
They did not have cool melodies. I mean, and he could not sing. What's his name? Milo or something?
Jello Biafra?
Jello? Yeah. That's a weird ass name.
Well, you know, like with I was saying this in class with George the other day, is like you know that someone's cool in punk if they have a weird ass name. Like someone just
Oh,
called
right,
like
yeah.
Joe is probably a douchebag. If they're like peanut butter sandwich Joe, they're a cool guy and they have a good story that goes along with their name. Like that's how.
Because they earned their nickname.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
You should
well-
ask George about his Jello Biafra story sometime.
I need to do that.
Yeah, you should.
He has so many stories.
Yeah.
Someone write a book on that man.
Not it.
Okay, yeah. Definitely. Absolutely.
So what's next? You've covered DIY.
Phoenix.
Revisionist, yes.
Revisionist.
Revisionism. Tell me.
Right. Punk is often inherently self-destructive. So, something, and it's also inherently, because it's fuck you, which is the next one, it's rebellion, right? So it's, once something becomes even remotely popular in punk and it's like agreed upon, oh, I like hardcore, they're like, fuck you, I want to write little shitty acoustic sad songs with a delay pedal, you know? Like, the second something becomes agreed that it's good, then the next generation, by the next generation I mean someone that's like 6 months older because nothing lasts.
That's true.
Also, like, generations die out pretty quickly because heroin.
Or suicide.
Yeah, or suicide, that too. Or their bus, like, crashes.
Explodes.
And, yeah, because...
Or they die in a plane
Because
crash.
they tried to wire it themselves and... Fucking morons. DIY doesn't always go right, kids.
That's true.
That's true. So, when something comes up, that means that it has to die, and we need something new out of it.
And we use...
And that's also another reason why punk is music, but it's also not music because it stretches so many genres because it gets torn up every 6 months and turned into something new.
It does, which is one of the things that makes it hard to pin down. It's far too expensive, but it also continues to destroy and be rebuilt with the like splinters of what was destroyed.
Yeah.
Because and one of the things, like, baby punks these days think punk is inherently
Wait, what
leftist.
did you say? Baby punks?
Baby punks, like I'm not an elder punk like George and our friend Benedict are elder punks, and then I am, an older punk now that I'm #actually in my 30s, and then I'm a baby punk.
Wait, you're in your 30s? Now I'm closer to knowing your age.
So like punks today.
Wait, you said just about in your, or like, so you're in your early 30s. So you're between 30 and 33, I want to say. Am I right?
Yes.
Fucking
Today on the Purple Room podcast, guess JJ's age.
I'm gonna go 31.3.
Nope, you're 2 years off.
So you're 33.
I'm 33. I aspire to be that excited about anything. Like, I don't care what it is. I just want to be that excited. And baby punks, now that we have the stratification, right, tend to think that punk is inherently leftist because currently it is inherently leftist, but punk started off semi-conservative because it was railing against...
by the dead Kennedys, because there was also that whole thing about the skinheads and them being Nazi punks, literally Nazi punks. And Sid Vicious wore a swastika, although that was a whole different thing, and that was just like to piss off the public.
Well, that's the fuck you aspect.
Yeah, that is the fuck you aspect.
But like...
And that's also the Vivian Westwood being a fucking genius.
And even today, though, like, if someone shows up at a show with swastika on them or, like, red ladder laces, even though everybody wants to say that lace code is dead, like, they're gonna get fucking stomped out. And I mean, I like that punk leans left now, but it started off conservative because they were railing against their parents' hippie values.
Yeah. Well, I don't know their parents' hippie values. They wasn't quite... Now, I'm gonna wait to do that huge knowledge dump later on.
Do you want a knowledge dump? You can.
I mean, yeah.
Give it to me.
I guess I'll just send
No,
it.
don't restrain yourself. What did William
Okay.
Blake say? Like, he who restrains his desire does so because his desire is weak enough to be restrained.
Who said that?
William Blake.
Oh, you and fucking William.
I love William Blake. He's punk as shit.
We should swear on this in courts every day.
We should. So give that knowledge dump.
Okay. Hippies, punks, they were at the same time, and people don't know that, and they should know that. So I want to say the first real punk ever, like musically, attitude, like fit all of the categories, was Jim Morrison, and the hippies fucking love Jim Morrison.
I love the Doors.
And the punks fucking love Jim Morrison. People agree on that for the most part.
Such a douchebag.
He was a fucking psychopath, and that's why he's punk. Because, okay, so Jim Morrison and the Doors, they released their first album in '67. Just to give you an example of like a hippie band that was also like releasing music then, that was like Jefferson Airplane. Jimi Hendrix's first album was '67. Cream, I want to say, was '67.
I love Cream. I love Clapton.
Stooges opened for Cream.
No shit.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
people think like 90s Clapton, like Tears in Heaven. I'm like, no, he was playing with SRV and Double Trouble. Yeah. And I love Clapton.
He was Blind Faith is an underrated fucking band. Yeah. So they were same time as hippies. They were rebelling against the peace and love, brother. We're all cool, man. Fuck Vietnam. But they were like, you know what? Fuck you. I like Vietnam. Deal with it.
And there's more revisionist history here, because I think you'd be hard pressed to find punks at that era being like pro-Vietnam.
Well, they weren't pro-Vietnam, but they definitely weren't out protesting Vietnam. They were more like, I don't want to even get remotely close to politics. I just want to kick out the jams, motherfucker. Quote the MC5.
Which is interesting, because punk is viewed as inherently political. Or like, I don't think it got political until later, the 80s.
Because first punk bands were like the Stooges and Iggy Pop, the MC5.
And Iggy Pop, the Stooges, and Iggy Pop and the Stooges are different musical entities.
All completely different. They sound totally different. Don't
equate them.
Yeah. Although the Stooges and Iggy Pop and the Stooges are slightly closer than Iggy Pop
as a
because
thing.
Iggy Pop is like a whole different thing. He was kind of like he was pop for a minute. And
it worked.
Yeah, it did work. He's fire. But so up until like 78 pretty much, like 78, it wasn't political because I don't know, like Iggy Pop and the Stooges, Raw Power, that was just like, it was raw power. It was just go fast, distorted, fucked up, like we're talking about, I don't know, riots and fucking drugs and sex. And that's pretty much it.
Are social issues,
but
right?
They didn't treat them as that.
Right. It was definitely a different lens of looking at the paradigm, right?
Yeah.
Because like in the 80s we got Revolution Summer and Rock Against Reagan, which were like speaking to broader politics rather than microcosms of politics and attitudes around them.
Yeah. It was more speaking to like teenage rebellion, more like, whereas Joe Strummer was speaking to like 20-year-old activist rebellion. Kind of. I mean, he was also speaking to teenage rebellion too, but that was more his message because he was like a 20-year-old activist.
And there is the teenage rebellion aspect is in part how we got straight edge. Which, like, I heard someone the other day talking about straight edge entirely removed from the music, which, like, just gave me fucking rickets.
I really don't like straight edge people, to be honest with you. They're, like, kind of obnoxious.
They become evangelists with it, but I love Minor Threat, right? Like,
straight edge had some bangers. But they didn't, because they invented it, they didn't know they were great.
And that's true. They
weren't straight edge, for the most part. Or at least in their early years.
In the early years, I can acquiesce to that, but like there was so much like, what was the lyric, right? That like sparked straight edge. Don't drink, or don't smoke, don't fuck, don't drink. At least I can think, right? And like there's a time and place for straight edge, which is in your teenage years when you're trying to avoid the teenage traps of those things that will get you into like the shit. But no, like Minor Threat definitely invented and later embodied straight edge.
Yeah.
but I tend to think that straight edge should probably stay within teens and early 20s. And I do, it's a similar thing with veganism where people become evangelical about it, right? Like if that is your paradigm and that's what you want to do, that's solid, right? And you can advocate for that without being a dick.
And just like you hear stories about like straight edge people, there's like some guy smoking outside the concert and they beat the shit out of him.
Yeah,
which
like
is an exaggeration, and that probably, I mean, that may have happened.
Well, punk is inherently exaggerated, and punk is
Right.
inherently revisionist. That's
Yeah,
what
that probably didn't exactly happen like that, but there were definitely like
Mhm.
there's prejudice and it's
Absolutely.
pretentious as fuck.
Which is not a punk thing.
Yeah.
To
Oh
do.
yeah, being pretentious is very unpunk.
It's super unpunk. Which is it's.
But they were though.
They're so fucking pretentious. It is like
And they are. Yeah.
pretension while being like, no, I'm not pretentious.
Yeah, fucking Taylor Swift fans are pretentious.
They are. So we've covered DIY ethics.
Isn't pretentious though? This is like the littlest side tangent. People who listen to country music and shitty 2000s butt rock because they don't really care about music, because they don't know anything about music. I'm not talking about like Johnny Cash country. I'm talking about like Florida Georgia Line.
Oh my God, I have thoughts, right? Like
I hate them so much.
punk or like country music and party rap have become the same thing to me, right? Because I appreciate like Johnny Cash and Waylon Jennings, and I appreciate the sort of outlaw country where it's like Tyler Childers and Sturgill Simpson and Devil Makes Three, but like
they were punks.
They're fucking punk as shit,
Yeah.
right? And like we have pop music doing a drag show as country music on the radio right now, and it's the same thing as rap music. It is like attractive people, modified vehicles, intoxicants, and I mean like prison and incarceration is also a theme, but it's like whether it is like hood rats or like girls down by the lake or like a Maserati or G6 versus like a lifted truck, and whether it is like Hennessy or beer, like it's the same sort of topic.
Right.
And it's
But I'm saying
unnecessary.
like pop country and butt rock, those people like they're the kind of people that don't listen to music on their own and they only listen to it with their friends and
Right.
they don't care about music and they're never gonna be like, wait a minute, you haven't heard that one Black Flag song? Fuck you! I hope you die and I hope your mother gets gang raped or something like that. Like that would happen.
That would happen. That would happen. And it's not, pop country isn't a vessel for values in the same way, so it's not something you can sit down and dissect and talk about how it sprawls
it's not
in
like,
the same way.
It's not like listening to like Lou Reed's lyrics where you have to dissect it. He's so fucking
And that's
good.
one of my favorite things about music, is that it's poetry, it's challenging, and that there's a lot there for intellectual endeavor.
Yeah,
Whereas
Dylan.
I loved it.
He's also punk. See, that's
He
where
got
you get,
so Jesus-y in the 80s, and I still love
and he's
Dylan.
A Jew. He's a full-on kike. I'm Jewish, I can say that. That's on the
So
internet now.
today on the Purple Room podcast, Aiden says slurs and the word gang rape. So we've covered DIY, we've covered
Fuck you.
no, we've covered phoenixes.
Oh,
This leads us into fuck you.
Okay, sure. Fuck you. That's a fantastic one. And
This
I
leads
feel
us
like
into fuck you.
that's the easiest to comprehend for all you people. I don't know how, especially because I'm going to assume that you're all brain dead. Because
JJ said
JJ. So it's pretty self-explanatory, to be honest. It's like, if you get confused, if you don't like something, if you don't like someone, if society says something you don't agree with,
Fuck 'em.
instant answer, fuck you, I don't need you, I'm gonna go DIY.
Yes. So taking popular paradigms and going against them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Literally, that's it. And that happens within punk just as much, more than it happens with punks talking about other people.
Which is in part why what is punk is this sort of ever-shifting quicksand and difficult to define, and like it's why punk rock and punkers themselves like eat up their own community, because something becomes popular and then they're like, well, that's bad and stupid, right? Like
Okay.
They sold out.
I'm gonna go on the most on-brand side tangent
Do
of
it.
all time. Machine Gun Kelly. Many of you don't know this, but he like was kind of actually accepted by punks for like a minute back when he was like rapping.
Okay.
Because he like did Warped Tour. His live sets were always like they didn't sound like rap. They sounded much more like Rage Against the Machine because he had a live band and it's like he was like rapping over like metal stuff.
Well, that's more akin to like Korn and the new
Right,
wave. I have thoughts about.
that's true.
I have thoughts about metal.
He toured with Limp Bizkit, unfortunately, and he toured with
Limp Bizkit's non-binary representation in the '90s, the unintentional, like the ladies, the fellas, and the people who don't give a fuck. Well, thank you, Fred Durst.
Oh, Fred, what a strange little man.
Accurate. He's like a weird, like anti-hobbit.
Anti-hobbit. Okay.
It's like a hobbit, but like not a hobbit. Anyways,
Okay.
Continue your side tangent about Machine Gun Kelly.
About Machine Gun
Because
Kelly.
I've never heard your rants about Machine Gun Kelly ever.
Right. And he also toured with like Linkin Park, did Warped Tour a couple times. I wouldn't want to do Warped Tour though. That would suck because it's hot as shit and you're driving in really hot states and it's humid and then you have to wear cool clothes on stage too and it just sucks all around. And also I don't like people who play at Warped Tour because they're annoying emos. Sorry, that's my own prejudice.
Yeah, very punk of you.
But then he released Tickets to My Downfall, which is actually his most punk album, kind of, most pop punk album. Which is
pop punk.
adjacent.
I like pop punk.
I like some pop punk. I like Machine Gun Kelly, and from time to time, some other folks like Avril Lavigne is the greatest fucking musician of all time, and don't even argue with me.
Well, like Avril Lavigne covering Joan Jett's Bad Reputation just makes me want to crawl in a hole and die.
I want to see that.
No, you don't. You don't. You don't.
It's not as bad as Britney Spears' Joan Jett cover.
I don't like that.
It's horrible.
I hate both of those things. Fuck you to both of those things.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, so he got popular. Everyone hated him. And then also the rap people hated him because Eminem beef with MGK. So basically everyone hates Machine Gun Kelly now because he's popular.
And there's a playfulness to hating popular things, I think,
sometimes.
right? Like there is like
But
I enjoy the hate.
That's also why so many people have run from the punk scene to do other things because you make money now? Oh, you have enough to feed your child? You have enough to fucking have a house in like not Compton? Fuck you. We're done. Get out of my scene. You can't play shows anymore.
And that's something I've always hated is like they sold out is like you should be happy that your friends
when Soundgarden signed that major deal, then like everyone hated them for a while, and then now they probably don't give a single fuck because they're all millionaires. But yeah, it's like you get successful punk scene rejects you. Same thing happened to Nirvana. That's why most people don't think they're punk.
It's so shitty, and it's frustrating, right? Because like if your dream is to make it as a musician and you start making it as a musician, and I think it probably stems from the fact that they will then, at least in theory, start making music that is no longer self-defined and is defined by record labels and what people want to hear on the radio and lose the sense of authenticity that comes with the punk scene.
Mm-hmm. But it's also like that whole thing of like, this is ours, you know?
Right. It is in-group, out-group stuff. And
also many punks, like, their identity is punk. You know,
right.
Like, I'm a punk, that's my whole thing in life. And like, oh, you're leaving that? I can't be around you anymore.
Which is also shitty because people contain multitudes and people can be more than one thing, and that's ego, right?
Yeah.
Like that's ego.
It's also, I think, part of the reason why good songwriters stay away from punk because they know that they'll get too popular for it. Because
that's
like ever thought
that's
about
astute.
Like,
follow that up. I want to know more about that.
Cobain, he knew how to write a song. He wasn't considered punk anymore. Chris Cornell, he knew how to write a song. He wasn't considered punk anymore. Joe Strummer's the only exception I can think of,
Okay.
Ghost drummer, and well, no, actually that's not true. It's the other one, but he's one of the main ones. Um, U2, they started out as a punk band, but then they got better at playing. The Edge became a fucking disgusting guitar player, and he's underrated as shit still. Um,
And I
and they
feel that
weren't
way
punk
about
anymore.
fucking Travis Barker from Blink 182, and I hate Blink 182, but everything
He
Travis
can
fucking Barker
drum.
does is
He
amazing.
can play his ass off. My God, yeah, he's unbelievable.
It is, and like U2 is interesting, right? Because I remember when like they released one of the new iPhones, and it all came out with a U2 album on it, and I think that was the
though. That was a glitch.
was it a glitch?
Yeah, that wasn't.
I was like, this is so fucking shitty, and like I enjoy.
No, that wasn't anything that they're doing. That was like someone at Apple fucked up.
Because I enjoy, like, I never got huge into U2, but like there's some of their songs that are enjoyable.
But there's
Like they literally have a
as
song
a
called "The Miracle
musician,
of Joey
I
Ramone."
really enjoyed dissecting their stuff because it's super for pop. It's which it basically is.
Yeah.
It's like it's really well written, really well constructed, and super intricate and weird guitar parts, like a lot of harmonics. And I could go all guitar nerd on this.
No, you should
about,
go all
like
guitar nerd
25
on this.
years. So he kind of takes a lot of prog influence, but he doesn't do it in a pretentious prog way. So, like, yes, for instance, they would use a lot of harmonics, which is I don't feel like explaining that because
Well, that's not helpful at all.
Harmonics is it's just a weird way of playing a note, is what it is, and it's rather uncommon in most Western music.
Like Pink Floyd comes to mind. Is that
Pink Floyd? They use it sometimes, not that much, but what's interesting about the Edge is a lot of guitar players will use harmonics mostly just in solos. Because what's nice about it is the note hangs for a long time and it just kind of stays there. So you can have that and then you can go harmonize down the neck somewhere. But the Edge will play chords with harmonics in like open tunings, which is weird. And then he does a lot of, this is kind of Dave Grohl-ish actually, because he does like a lot of, it's like snare patterns on guitar, so it's like a faster pattern, like, you know, so it's on the higher strings, and he does that, which is also pretty uncommon in pop. Most people stay on the lower strings. I don't know. And then the drumming is super weird because much like the Velvet Underground, I forget the drummer's name, but he stays off of the cymbals quite a lot, and it's almost more like tribal sounding because he does like a lot of, instead of playing on the ride, he'll play on like the tom, so it's an all around deeper sound, which kind of makes up for the fact that the Edge doesn't play the lower chords.
I have a deep appreciation for weird fucking drums. Like jazz drummers and metal drummers can just make music with just the drum kit in it. It's absolutely incredible. Like when there's like jazz ensemble that when I go to poetry slams plays behind the open mic, and it's amazing. Drummers are amazing.
Oh my God, I love going to death metal shows, and well, moshing is fun as fuck, but just watching the drummer's hand, I don't even comprehend that. Like
Inferno from Behemoth is his kit is like half the fucking stage. It's and he's
that
so
poor
fast.
band when they were little, that must have sucked. Like the van and those.
Like you would need a separate band for his drum kit as it is.
That would be so unfortunate. Charlie Watts. I want a drummer like that. That just has like 3 drums.
And like the Violent Femmes, they have like 3 drums and it's all brushes and it's really, really enjoyable. And the drummer from Clutch is super fun to watch, Jean-Paul Castor. He looks like a fish to me on stage because you see him counting every time he hits and he's just I was like, how do you not have like rampant TMJ?
Have you seen him drum?
Yes.
It's the weirdest fucking faces on the planet.
It's amazing. It's like
all guitarists do that though. Like when you see like the guitar face, well, like in like
have you seen where they replace the guitar faces with slugs? I'm gonna show you that at some point. But it's people like making guitar faces and it's just replacing them with superimposing slugs where the guitar is, and they're like It's phenomenal. It's the best thing I've ever seen. Anyways, punk rock.
Best thing I've ever seen was Avril Lavigne live at Boston Con.
I think I went. Was this the show in like 2008 or like?
Avril Lavigne?
Yeah.
It was last year.
Okay, never mind. I went to see Avril Lavigne live too, and I don't
You
love
saw
it.
Avril Lavigne
Yeah,
live?
I saw Avril Lavigne live.
I'm gonna make fun of you for years.
I make it easy. You
Oh.
should. You should.
I thought you hated Avril Lavigne. We were just talking about.
I went for the opener because I'm a pretentious douchebag. I went to see Green Day and Weezer for the opener too. The Interrupters were opening for them.
Okay. Who was the Avril Lavigne opener?
It was Boys Like Girls.
I don't know.
They were like silly emo band. Or they were a silly emo band. I don't know if they still exist.
All those silly emo bands went. They all went to the like even more depressed dude. Like their music videos are all like a guy wearing a denim jacket and really skinny jeans with like a hollow body guitar and a delay pedal in like a warehouse, just like, singing about his feelings.
Yes. Yeah. It's like the entire Dashboard Confessional discography
That's what happened to the Midwest emo scene. That's where it went, guys.
Anyways, where were we on
also
punk?
what happened to Blink-182, R.I.P.
R.I.P. Like, I'm just glad Blink-182 is dead. I think Blink-182 is terrible.
They're not great.
They're not great, but they are prolific and
good fucking songwriters.
ubiquitous. I don't know if they're good fucking songs.
They are. They know.
It may be a matter of personal taste to me.
Yeah, no, I can kind of try and separate that. I pride myself in being able to separate a good songwriter from someone I hate. You know,
That's
I hate
fair.
Britney Spears, but once in a while I'm like, that's actually kind of an impressive melody to come up with.
Yeah.
Although I don't think she wrote her own songs.
I have no idea.
Highly doubt.
And I think I'm thinking about Blink-182 lyrically, where I'm like, that's
yeah.
just like you're literally talking about poop. Yeah. Like you don't need to do that.
Yeah.
You're grown ass men.
Okay, lyrically they're pretty objectively bad.
Yeah, but I think
it worked for what they were doing.
Yeah, it did, and some of their music was objective bops.
Mm-hmm. What's my age again?
That's one of my karaoke songs, actually.
You do karaoke?
Of course I do karaoke. You know who I am? Like, of course I do karaoke.
Okay, well now.
So where are we?
Yeah,
right.
Like kind of hopped around.
We hopped around. I think we covered everything on your prep list, but like.
Yeah.
So that leads us to your favorite punk. Like, if you were going to leave viewers with
5 albums, I think I'll do.
Okay, give us 5 albums.
First Velvet's album, which is it self-titled?
I think so.
Okay.
So, if they were to Google the Velvets, like it's
yeah,
the Velvet Underground.
The Velvet Underground. It's the one with the banana. Designed by Andy Warhol because
he was deep in the velvet.
Yeah,
he had his fingers in every pie.
That sounded weird.
It was the wrong phrasing, but here we are. We've come this far.
It happened, yeah.
But I think it was accurate for what Andy Warhol was doing in that scene anyways.
Yeah, he's just a weird fucking dude. Okay, first Velvet's album.
Mm-hmm.
Raw Power, Iggy and the Stooges. Not to be mistaken with the Stooges or Iggy Pop. This is... I'm actually going to check the name of this album because I want to get it right, because it's a Black Flag album, but it's not an official... I mean, it is official, but it's not like... It's not
Henry Rollins or
album.
Keith Morris? Black Flag?
First 4 years by Black Flag.
Okay.
It's a collection of a lot of... It's mostly Keith Morris, I think. In Utero, Nirvana, which is grunge, but it's also punk. And it's probably the rawest album. So how many am I at?
4.
Okay, 4. One last album. London Calling, The Clash.
Okay.
That's my list for go listen to punk. And then there's so many more though. Listen to the entire fucking Dead Kennedys catalog, and the Misfits are fire.
I like Danzig better than the Misfits because Danzig, like, I enjoy the Misfits, but Danzig is just the Doors done heavier.
He really is. He's
really like very Morrison.
He sounds so Morrison-y. And they're like kind of jam bandy for the 80s.
Yeah, they are, and I have a deep appreciation for jam bands.
I can't with jam bands.
Well, if you're thinking jam bands like Fish, Fish is inaccessible unless you're like.
And that's really sloppy songwriting. I feel like Stone Dead Vermont might be worse though, because it would feel longer. I would
It
not.
might.
Wait, what are drugs?
But even as a poet, like there's something that I appreciate lyrically with jam bands where they're like putting words together that sound good together, even if it doesn't make sense. But things like the Jabberwocky come to mind, and like the appreciation for rhyming. Like I've said it in poetry class a couple rhymes, like the fish lyric towards like give the director a serpent deflector, mud rat detector, and like
It's kind of a shitty rhyme. It's kind of like it's not great.
You would need the rest of the music backing it, but yeah.
I prefer Cobain's lyric, which I feel like is also super poetic because it's kind of similar to who were we talking about?
We were talking about Fish.
No. In poetry, we were talking about who did I compare Cobain to?
You didn't yet.
It was someone who stuck their head in an oven. What was her name?
Sylvia Plath.
Sylvia Plath.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Super,
Kurt Cobain has big
super
Sylvia Plath
Sylvia
vibes.
Plath.
Yeah, that's astute.
And they also, they both killed themselves.
So like, what would I say for?
Wait. Really quick, when someone kills themselves by sticking their head in an oven, they're not burning their head off, they're killing themselves with gas. I want y'all to know that, because some people I think are confused, and it's a good thing to clear up. I don't know why, but...
And on that note, that is the Purple Room podcast for the week. Don't stick your head in an oven.